All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Tennis Channel Inside In. Mitch Michals on the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, reminding you that this podcast is available on all your platforms. It's my honor today. This is a great chat, a great opportunity, speaking with a little bit of tennis royalty here, a two-time major champion, someone who was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1987, and is also known, or maybe well known, for being the face of one of the most iconic pieces of sneakers and fashion, really, in the game. The Smith Adidas has sold over 100 million pairs. Stan Smith, welcome to the show. Really delighted to talk to you.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it.
So I wanted to start with this, and there's a lot of different ways we can go on this chat. We're recording this before the U.S. Open starts, but not to make you sound too old, but do you feel like you're a little bit of the old guard now in the sport? Because now you've reached the point where you're a revered figure. You're one of the links to a forgotten or maybe underappreciated era. Do you feel like you're one of the old guards of the sport?
The golden era. Well, I don't know if it's that much different. We got some great players today that are lighting up the courts in a great way. It's been unbelievable. So I did get to play against some of the greatest. Rod Laver and Arthur Ashe, John Newcomb, Emerson Laver. Stolley. There's so many good players that played, before my era, during my era, then right after my era. You of course got Connors and Borg and McEnroe and Becker and Vilas. All those guys were players. I got to play against most of those guys as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting how your career worked too, because there was the start of the Open era, there was really the rock and roll era, and you were in the midst of everything in terms of your upbringing, in terms of how the game changed. You were a constant figure with a lot of different, dynamics. But I want to also start too. I mean, I know you live now and you're based in South Carolina, and you've been, a proud member of the Hilton Head area, but you got your start in California, as did many tennis champions in this country. Why do you think it was and still is a great place to grow up as a tennis player living in California?
Well, the LA Tennis Club, LATC, was like the hub of tennis at the time. And I grew up in Pasadena. And my last year in high school, I actually drove to the LATC every day and practiced there. And there was other, young players there, but also older players that came through the area, and they practiced at the LATC. And so, a lot of the great players going back to Vines and Budge and Connolly and all these different players played there way before I did. And it was a great place to start the game, to learn the game and be able to play every day outside. And I was fortunate to grow up in that area.
Yeah, and I know timing is a big part of your story. Pancho Segura comes to the area, and you get to learn at the foot of knowledge, real tennis royalty. Timing is a large part of your story. Also, the fact, Stan, that you're a self-described late bloomer. It took you a while to find your groove, and I think in all sports, it's a lesson in there that it doesn't have to happen overnight. That there's a lot of great players that take time to succeed.
Well, that does happen. It's amazing how I grew up playing basketball, football, baseball, track and field, and didn't really get that serious about the game until I was about 15. And as you said, timing is everything. And Pancho Segura was hired by the Pasadena tennis patrons to come to Pasadena High School and worked with us on Saturday mornings. And we played on these kind of pink-colored tennis courts with hardwire nets, and it was not the country club sort of a background that a lot of kids have. But Segura, in my opinion, maybe the best coach ever coached the game, and we happened to get his knowledge every Saturday morning, and then periodically I'd drive to Beverly Hills and practice at Beverly Hills Tennis Club where he was coaching, and so I had the benefit of him, as well as a great college coach in George Tolley, who was a coach at USC.
Yeah. Do you think that your ability your decision to go to college really helps you for your development of the game? Because it was a time, and college has kind of never been hotter right now for college players coming into the pros, but there's a lot of players in your era that decided to go right to it. And you stuck it out. You won the national title. You kind of lived that college life, pledged to fraternity. Do you think that helped your development?
I'm not sure my fraternity helped my development or not, but certainly the opportunity to play in college was great. In fact, really before my time and even just a bit after, most of the players did go to college. Arthur Ashe and I are the last two guys to win a major. They graduated from college, but uh, almost all the players did that. And then my doubles partner, Eric Van Dillen, who I played a couple of years in Davis Cup, ended up leaving college. He's one of the first guys. And then, a few years later, you got McEnroe and Connors who went for a couple of years or a year. And then Todd Martin and Mal Washington and Jared Palmer, some of those guys went for a couple of years. But in my time, it was pretty general to go to college, and then there was no pro game. There wasn't a pro game until the year I graduated. Again, it was a timing thing. It was just perfect. As I graduated, I just naturally went into all the tournaments that we played in the summertime were amateur tournaments. And then overnight in '68, they all became professional tournaments.
They certainly did. And I know your accomplishments and your brethren's were great. We do kind of want that streak to end. We want some college players to win some majors. I think McEnroe was the last one. So we'd like to see some of that happen. But then going into your pro career, I mean, did you have a straightforward goal of I want to rise to the top? The U.S. Open in '71 was your first major title. Followed that up with Wimbledon. But were there set goals coming out like I think I can be the best and I'm trying to incrementally get there?
When I was 16 years old, I was part of the Pasadena Tennis Patrons Clinic in the mornings, and I was getting inspired by Segura and other players. And I set 4 goals. One was to become a member of the U.S. Davis Cup team. 2 was to be number 1 in the U.S. 3 was to win Wimbledon. And 4 was to be number 1 in the world. And so those what I call them dream goals, because at that time I wasn't even in the top 10 in the 16 unders in Southern California. So they were, I didn't even tell anybody because I was kind of embarrassed, except for this girl I was dating in high school. But that's what kind of motivated me to practice a little harder. Each day I jump rope a little longer. I do some wind sprints. I practice my serve. I'd visualize being in the finals of Wimbledon, being stronger than the other guy on the other side of the net in the 5th set in the finals of Wimbledon. And so all those things did motivate me, even though they were kind of ridiculous, actually, at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, too, because that U.S. Open title came off of a brutal loss, a tough loss to Newcomb at Wimbledon. So looking at your story, it was like, okay, we have to get some redemption here and move forward, which you did, finishing the year at the top of the game. Wimbledon was the iconic title. I mean, everybody that plays this sport talks to the people about how important Wimbledon is. And you play Nastase, it goes 5 sets, an iconic match that had historical ramifications for you on and off the court. But the first thing with that is you still have some of those hops from jumping over the net on match point.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do it right now, but I might if I was motivated enough. But that was, it's funny because I remember seeing Roy Emerson do it a few times at Wimbledon. And so I thought that was sort of the thing to do. And certainly it wasn't difficult. When you win that title, you could jump over 3 nets. You're so amped up. But that was special to win the U.S. Open at our courts. The funny thing about it was the semifinals were rained out Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We played the semis on Tuesday, the finals on Wednesday, and I was in the doubles final as well. So, and we almost didn't finish that. We actually played a tiebreaker for the title in the 5th set of the doubles at the U.S. Open, and we split the prize money, which is about, I think, $300 or something like that.
Yeah, times have changed a little bit in that regard. But then looking at it, I mean, the match against Nastase at Wimbledon, 5 sets, a brutal match down to the wire. So much is talked about even in the current game, Stan, with nerves and managing them. How do you think it worked for you being able to not let the moment consume you, stay in the fight, and then ultimately just give yourself a chance to succeed?
The year before in '71, you mentioned that I had a brutal match against Newcomb and lost 6-4 in the 5th. And so I think that experience gave me a little bit of an edge over Nastase because he hadn't been in a final yet. And of course, we had totally different games, totally different personalities, and it was made the match interesting, I think, for the fans in that respect. But certainly, it came down to the last shot. Really, it could have gone either way, and I was looking like it was going to go like the year before after winning the first set, losing the next two. Or sorry, losing the first set, winning the next two, losing the fourth, and then going into the fifth. So it was an exciting match, that's for sure.
You mentioned timing being everything, looking at, how you're known off the court for the shoe. Do you think, looking back, it's been so long, but do you think that without that win, you would have this situation? Because winning Wimbledon kind of did legitimize you, especially in Europe, where they started to know who you were and just how good you were.
That helped. I
Yeah.
signed the agreement with Adidas around that time. We were talking before I won Wimbledon because I'd been there the year before, and so they were looking at getting a stronger presence in the U.S. and they're looking for an American. But winning Wimbledon certainly helped make that ink dry on that contract.
More with Stan Smith here on Tennis Channel Inside In, talking about his incredible legacy on and off the court with the Stan Smith Adidas shoe that I mentioned at the start of the show, selling over 100 million pairs. It is, and it's got to be surreal thinking about the lasting impact, Stan, right? Like how it's lasted and is as popular as ever in 2024, given that you started with your first shoe being the first of its kind. The fact that the staying power is 50 plus years and gaining steam really says a lot about what that impact was.
I was fortunate. I tell people I was at the right time, at the right place, with the right product, with the right company, and in the right position to be offered that opportunity to work with Adidas, which was the greatest brand at the time and still very high out there as far as brands. And so it's been a pleasure for me to be involved and connected with that company and with that shoe. And there's been so many experiences around that shoe with different materials, different colors, different designs, and I've done a lot of interesting things with Pharrell Williams, Stella McCartney, Madonna, all these different Kate Moss, all these different people that were that. The great thing about it is a lot of those people in the business wore the shoe because they liked it, and it wasn't because they were being paid. And it's such a simple sort of a shoe with being very plain, but you can wear it with anything. It's comfortable and it's a pretty good price point. And sometimes being, more simple is better.
Do you think that's why it resonates specifically with younger generations who obviously aren't familiar with your tennis career? That and the fact that, Stan, it also was an athletic shoe and now is a key part of the lifestyle shoes that are out there. So I'm just curious your perspective on why younger generations who might not be familiar with your game are just so big fans of the sneaker.
Well, I can tell you a quick story. My niece, who lived in London, was going to a private school there, and she was wearing the shoe for PE. And the teacher said, "You can't wear that shoe for PE." And she says, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, it's not a trainer. It's not a performance shoe. It's a fashion shoe." And she said, "Well, my uncle won Wimbledon wearing that shoe." And she said, "Well, okay." But, I did an interview with, I think it was Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago, and I mentioned that probably 95% of the people in the world have no idea who I am, but they know my name. And my wife piped in the background. She said, 99% of the people in the world have no idea, who you are. And so my tennis accomplishments have gone so far, but obviously anybody under 50 or maybe even 60 would not have seen me play. And unless they're students of the game and followed it, then they wouldn't know that I was a player. And so it doesn't bother me at all, but it is funny to see, these young girls or young boys. And the great thing is that both boys and girls like it, and young men and women. So it's been fun to see, people gravitate towards that shoe and continue to support it.
They certainly have been, especially given what you said with the fabric and Adidas using a lot of recycled, material for it and doing a great job for the environment. You mentioned one person's name in particular, Pharrell Williams. I know there's been a collaboration at this point. What was it like working with him? Obviously, a name brand and someone really recognized in the music and fashion world. But what was it like collaborating with Pharrell?
Well, he's a great guy. The first time I met him was at the U.S. Open. He came and he was doing some filming, and so we sat together for about 3 hours. And he really didn't know much about the game of tennis. He had met Serena Williams and her parents, I think, the year before that, but he really didn't know much about tennis. So I was trying to explain the scoring
Yeah.
and everything else. And we walked on the center court, the Arthur Ashe Stadium, and I said, what's the biggest crowd you performed in front of? He said, well, about 100,000. And I said, well, this is about 24,000. It's pretty impressive, to be two people, everyone focusing on for 24,000 fans. And he said, yeah, that is impressive. So I've just encouraged him to stay as positive as he is with the influence he has with young people around the world, and the things he's done and the things he's designed, the things he's sung, the things he's produced are terrific. And so he's one of the guys I've really enjoyed getting to know a little bit.
Certainly helps to have someone like that who is a fan of yours. And on the pop culture front, I know it's probably was something that was brought up to you by your kids, or maybe, I don't want to say grandkids, but when you were mentioned in certain music, certain like hip hop songs or other songs in general, how was that first presented to you? Was it through one of your kids?
Yeah, my daughter came home. I think she was 13. She said, "Dad, you're famous." I said, "Oh, really? What do you mean?" She said, "Well, Jay-Z has you in some of his songs." I said, "That's great. Who's Jay-Z?"
Yeah.
I soon got to know a little bit about him, but it was funny to see, and to hear him saying he's just there chilling in his white Stan Smiths.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that legitimizes you with a whole nother generation. So, but it's interesting too, because a lot of your backstory with the shoe and also getting into your playing career, Stan, involves courage, involves some decisions that I don't think other tennis players would have made. The boycott of Wimbledon, and supporting the South African tennis player in trying to eliminate the apartheid. But nowadays, we're seeing more athletes show their courage and show that side of them. At the time, did you struggle with anything, or was that just something you felt was a core belief?
I had a good core foundation from my parents, although we really weren't in a diversified part of the world in Pasadena. But getting to know Arthur was great, and in college I got to know a lot of athletes, and there was a lot of diversity there, and so I've always felt that everyone really is more alike than disalike, and so it never made sense to me that the racial issues that took place, but I did try to fight for Arthur along the way. He was a good friend and a leader of the ATP, one of our founders, as I was, and we actually were in business together a little bit, and then of course we played each other in some critical moments, and so we learned to respect each other to a certain degree, and I loved the guy, and is my pleasure and my honor to really help support him in some of the issues that he was fighting for.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this young boy from South Africa really proved to me and to many others that if you have an education, you can do anything, and it doesn't matter, where you're from and what you look like. And he certainly had to deal with a cultural shock coming to the U.S. from South Africa, and dealing with that. And then he the greatest kind of education story that goes along with that is he got married. He had three kids, and all three of them went to Princeton. So
Yeah.
kid who grew up in the township of Alexandria in Johannesburg to have three kids going to Princeton, I mean, no one would have ever believed it.
Wow, that's such a cool story. Shows what this game can do if the right people or if good people are involved in helping others, paying it forward. Being friends with Arthur Ashe, one of the most iconic figures of this game. Stan, you had a first, front row seat to what he was able to do, and you can kind of pass that knowledge on to other generations. But what's something that you think rather, Arthur should be remembered for? Having seen it and having been around, what were some of the things that Arthur really accomplished and stood for when he was in his heyday?
Well, first of all, just on the ATP side, he was the president of the ATP at one point. He also really helped draft our code of conduct, which, his father was a policeman, and his father taught him to have respect for everybody, to play by the rules, and to give it your best shot. And so those basic principles that his father and mother gave him, lived through his life, and not surprisingly. And so when he felt strongly about something, he was fairly soft-spoken, but he would not put up with things. And at one time, he actually was playing Nastasi in the finals of Stockholm, I think it was, and Nastasi went crazy, and Arthur said, you can't behave like that. I'm walking off, and he walked off the court, and they defaulted, and they came back and ended up defaulting Nastasi about 20 minutes later. They figured out that it was which guy they should be defaulting, but he did stand up for what he believed, and he was constantly reading, keeping up with the current events of the year and in 1968. Imagine that year. He not only won the U.S. Open, but it was a year of obviously the war was going on in Vietnam. Robert Kennedy was shot, and so many traumatic things were happening during that time. And he ended his life by doing some protests. He was, even when he was sick with AIDS, he was protesting in Washington, D.C., I think, for civil rights, and he was arrested and put in jail. He was really, really sick at the time, but he felt strongly about supporting those causes.
Yeah, his lasting image on the game can be felt today when you watch some of the outstanding action, how diverse the quality of players are. It's just remarkable and a testament to Arthur Ashe's leadership. I did also want to just put a bow on this too with, you mentioned earlier the Davis Cup, and I know yourself being there, Arthur Ashe being a legendary captain too. And I watched that part of this when I was chatting with you, and how you beamed with pride when you mentioned that was one of your goals. It really is an important thing, especially in your era, to represent your country, represent America, and play and win the Davis Cup.
I was fortunate to be on 10 different teams, and we won 7 times. And Arthur was a fellow competitor the first couple of times, and then he later became the captain of the team near my last couple of times of playing. And so it was important to him. I remember his father and my parents, saved up money to go to Australia in 1968. We both told our parents, you should come to Australia because that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring back the Davis Cup from Australia. So both my parents and his father were there for that time, and it was a special moment, capping off that year of him winning the U.S. Open, which was also. I'd never forget the picture of he and his father holding the trophy there at Forest Hills.
Yeah, I think I saw a photo of you guys wearing hats on that trip, just enjoying yourselves on that Davis Cup trip.
We actually were in a business together, and they took a picture of us on the London Bridge with our top hats. And that was a great shot.
Well, as we finish up here with Stan Smith on Tennis Channel Inside In, going into the U.S. Open period right now, you're going to be there in New York. It's an interesting time for the tennis calendar. Also, just can't beat tennis in New York, the Open. I know it's changed in your lifetime in terms of surfaces, in terms of venue. But when we get to New York, when we get to the year's final major, it all just seems right with the tennis world.
It's going to be exciting as usual. We've got a great group of male players. They're competing out there, and the female players as well. So I think both are going to bring some excitement to the fans. When I was playing, we didn't play at night too much, but these night matches are really exciting, and sometimes they go into the wee hours of the morning. And the talent out there is deeper, and the at the top of the game, guys are hitting shots that you would not believe, and men and women as well. I mean,
Yeah.
the women's game has grown dramatically, but the men's game as well. You'll see players, playing shots that you couldn't play, and the rackets have made a big difference to allow them to hit some shots that would be impossible, really, with the rackets. But now we're seeing, in fact, we're seeing a little bit of a shift towards players coming to the net a little bit more, taking advantage of short balls and hitting more volleys instead of just staying back there and grinding the whole time. But the fans get involved. They're pretty knowledgeable. They get behind their guy or girl, and they support them, and the drama is intense.
I know you're really tuned into the game, and I know you follow immensely the top and have that appreciation for what they're accomplishing. But that point you made, I was thinking about that too, and in terms of linking the eras, coming back, coming to the net, playing short balls, is that something that makes you brim a little bit? And seeing that maybe is like a little bit of a throwback.
Well, you have a chance to come in when you get a short ball. If you don't come in, then you're really denying an opportunity. But I have an academy, and we're trying to get our kids. We're emphasizing doubles. We're emphasizing learning to volley. If you don't learn it early on, you don't want to come in at all, and therefore you stay back, and you miss out on those opportunities. And so I think we're seeing players a little more confident. Certainly, the college players have shown that they can volley better. In fact, just a fun thing happened just today is that I was talking a guy named J.J. Tracy and his partner Robert Cash won the NCAAs from Ohio State, and J.J. was at our academy for a couple of years. They just got to the finals of Newport in their first tournament, and played a good match against the Aussies that were in the finals of Wimbledon, and they got a wild card into the U.S. Open. So hopefully we're going to see them play there. They're a good team. I saw them play in Newport, and they can compete out there, and they're going to have some fun on the doubles court at the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I know in the documentary they made about your life, Who is Stan Smith, that I recommend everybody watch, takes you behind, the person behind the shoe. But, it's a good place to finish. A lot of what you're still doing is helping people out with the academy and with humanitarian work and just growing the game. Is that going to continue as long as you're breathing? That's something you want to do, is just help.
Yeah, it's sort of my thing now. I really want to try to help out as much as possible, and whether it's tennis or otherwise. And there are a lot of people out there with talent, like this young boy from South Africa that who really was kind of self-educated almost until he came to the U.S. and then got a college degree and moved on and wrote a bestseller and has done so much. But there are a lot of people out there like that, and all they need is a little bit of opportunity. And my role really in our academy is just to encourage kids, because it's so tough today. I'd hate to be out there as a young kid trying to figure it out, in high school and in college. And so any encouragement I can give them, I do, and help them keep a perspective, knowing that it's not going to be, easy all the time. You're going to have to put in the work, and it'll pay off down the road.
Well, this was a fun chat. Stan Smith, remember, the Stan Smith Adidas is the tennis shoe in the world of tennis and fashion. It was the first. It is still the best. You're a wealth of knowledge, and great that the game has you involved and locked in. So appreciate you giving me the time here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Stan Smith, all the best. Hope to maybe do this one day again. Thanks for coming on the show.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having me.